So today I wanted to talk about what self-coaching is, why it matters so much, why I wanted to do this topic, and then I wanted to get into my particular method of self-coaching because it really depends from one person to the next, kind of like what that looks like. So I want to get into, from a practical standpoint, specifically what it looks like when I'm doing self-coaching in my own business. And then I have 4 examples of things that I myself have worked through. So I want to share some of that with you. And then as well, some sample questions and 3 really important pieces to keep in mind when you are doing self-coaching in your own life or business. If you decide to do this type of thing on your own, some really important things to consider. Okay, so to begin with, what even is self-coaching? So really, this is about working through issues independently so that you can address them and deal with them. So when I'm working with my clients and we're doing coaching sessions, it's me talking to them, working through any types of obstacles, perfectionism, procrastination, overwhelm, imposter syndrome, all of these types of things. And when you're doing self-coaching, you're essentially doing that, but to yourself, right? So you're doing it on an internal basis where you are basically both the coach and the client. So it's kind of a cool thing to be able to do. And the real benefit to doing this is that you get to address issues in real time on your own, so that they stop really being these obstacles for you, so that they stop getting in your way, so that they stop being that bottleneck. And so this is also not addressing, it's not just about like dealing with surface level issues, right? It's really about diving in a little bit deeper so that you can really overcome those actual issues that you might be struggling with. And this is something that you learn how to do in Solopreneur CEO, my 6-month one-to-one coaching program. This would be helpful for you to get some insights into what coaching looks like, why, how it can sort of help you and that kind of thing. So if you've been thinking about joining Solopreneur CEO and getting coaching, this kind of gives you a little bit more reassurance around what it looks like. If you're a little bit nervous about it, or if you're intimidated by it, you're not really sure what it looks like, hopefully this will kind of put you at ease for it. So my method of self-coaching, the way that I tend to do it for myself, and it looks very different depending on the person and that kind of thing. So I do it differently with different clients. But the way that I tend to do it in my own life, my own business, is to really ask myself a lot of powerful questions. And then it's about being willing to answer those questions honestly, to be very honest with myself, being willing to sit with my answers, even when it might be a little bit uncomfortable. And then from there, check in with what I am willing and what I am not willing to do about it. So that's a really important piece to take into consideration. I also like to layer in some somatic techniques, right? So like EFT tapping, that kind of thing. But all of this, for me, for my style of coaching, starts with guided questions. And then we layer in somatic techniques if that's a good fit, if it connects back to that particular obstacle or issue, if it makes sense for that particular type of coaching situation. These are skills that you develop over time. So self-coaching is a practice. It is something that's really similar to productivity. I'm always talking about how productivity is one of those skills that we can develop, and we never get to that point of like, we can never be more productive. You can always improve your productivity, and self-coaching is the same way. It's a skill that you just keep on developing and building over time. This also connects back to doing weekly audits and performance reviews in step 9 of the Productivity Powerhouse framework. So if you have done that step in the program, then you'll know that, when you went through the weekly audits and the performance reviews, if you've done any of them, you'll see that some of the questions, it's a lot about analyzing your business, assessing how things are going, deciding how you're going to move forward. But some of the questions are also around your approach to things, how you're feeling and thinking about things. So that's like a very base version of self-coaching. And also the Productivity Powerhouse workbook in general has probably given you that space to do a little bit of like self-coaching light on your own. If you have gone through the workbook and you've like uncovered some interesting things about yourself that you maybe didn't realize before, that indicates that you've already done a little bit of self-coaching, which is really cool. So it can be really useful for doing that. And I also want to point out here that if you have gone through step 9, right, or if you've gone through any of the lessons but you haven't done the workbook, I would really, really encourage you to do that, because it's not just about watching the videos or reading through the companion guide. It's about actually taking action on all of these things. And that includes answering those questions in the workbook, because things are going to come up for you that won't come to mind if you're just watching through the lessons and that kind of thing. Okay. Then when we bring that back to Solopreneur CEO, my 6-month coaching program, with my clients, when we're doing coaching, what we essentially do is we go through much of this process on our coaching calls together. I'm coaching my clients on our calls, for the hour, for the 75 minutes, however long our session happens to be. And then we build these skills over time. And we have these sort of fast track methods of doing it. I will give my clients these like customized thought exercises or thought experiments so that they can process things on their own in between sessions. So what happens is basically we'll do a coaching session and I will coach them through things. And then based on what their specific struggle might be, their particular obstacle that they're kind of facing, I will design a customized thought experiment which guides them through doing their own self-coaching. And then they can go away and do that in between sessions, and then they'll, test it out, see what happens, and then they come back at our next session and we kind of assess it and adjust it and pivot it as needed based on what they sort of got from it and what worked for them and what didn't work for them and all of those types of pieces. An important point to note here as well, that a lot of new stuff often comes up when you're doing this work. When you are doing self-coaching, oftentimes you're going to start working through one issue, and then you're going to realize that there might be a whole other issue to deal with. You peel back one of the layers, and then there's something underneath to sort of deal with. The reason why I want to make note of this is because it's good to be aware of. I just kind of want to caution you that if you are doing self-coaching, it can be a little bit of a shock sometimes if you aren't expecting new things to come up. If you think that you're dealing with one particular issue and then that actually uncovers another issue, it can be a little bit of a shock. So you just want to make sure that you're in a very sort of safe space to be able to work through those different issues and to almost assume that something else is going to be underneath that surface. One more point that I want to reiterate before we move into, what this looks like on a practical level for me doing self-coaching for myself, and for examples of how I've worked through issues in my own life and business. The point that I wanted to make here is that self-coaching is different for everyone. So I mentioned that earlier, but I just want to reiterate that the methods that I use and the questions that I use for myself are not necessarily the exact same methods or the exact same questions that I work with on my clients. It's not the same types of ones that they might use when they're doing self-coaching. All of this is going to be, as with everything, as you already know here inside Productivity Powerhouse, everything's going to be fully customized. You can kind of get a general idea of how it works from today's session, but it's going to be customized. In order for it to be truly effective for you, you're going to want to be doing a particular method that really works well for you and asking yourself the questions that are a really good fit for you. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Let me know in the chat what you're thinking, what you're feeling about all this. Or if you're watching the replay, shoot me an email, let me know. Okay, so from a practical standpoint, when I am doing self-coaching, it usually happens in one of two ways. Either it's while I'm out for a long walk. So I'll usually go out for like 60 minutes to 75 minutes, which is about the length of my coaching sessions as well with clients. But I'll go out for that length of a walk and I will go through coaching in my head. So I will be coaching myself while I'm out for a walk by myself. I can't do self-coaching if I'm out for a walk with someone else. It doesn't work the same. And so in that case, I will often email myself from my phone about any breakthroughs that I have. So I might get back to my office and I have like 7 emails waiting for me after a walk if I have like really gone through some good things. So that's one of the ways that I do it, is while I'm out for a walk. The other way that I like to self-coach is to literally write down questions and then journal it out to see what comes up for me, right? So it either happens in my head while I'm working through things, and then I write down notes for myself just so I can hold on to those little nuggets, or else I will just be writing, and it'll be like a stream of consciousness as I am answering these very specific types of questions, and I'll be following my thought processes in a very strategic manner to get to the actual answer that I need to get at. A few examples of issues that I have worked through when I'm doing self-coaching for myself include, first of all, is ego fears. I have held myself back in a variety of ways over the years because of an ongoing underlying fear that if I am too successful, I'll get a big ego. This has just been an underlying, ongoing sort of fear of really never want that to happen, right? Like that just feels terrifying. This is something that working through has been really interesting because it's one of those things, as I mentioned, where you'll start to peel back the layers when you're doing the self-coaching. So you think that it's this one issue and then you uncover it and it becomes something else and then something else. So in my case, when it comes to ego fears, it started out when I first realized what was sort of going on, when I was trying to like get at it, it started out as procrastination. Early on in my business, I would not do certain tasks that would have led to my business success. And by unraveling that a bit more and digging into that procrastination, I found that underneath the surface, there was some imposter syndrome type of stuff going on. And then digging into that more, I realized that there was also that sort of ego fear of getting a really big ego. So all of these kinds of pieces pulled away, you could see how the procrastination was more of a symptom of these other things going on beneath the surface. Now, because I've now done this self-coaching around it, I've been able to, and now I know what the symptoms are. I know that the procrastination, if I'm holding myself back from doing things that can move my business forward, that can lead to some really great business success, I know then, okay, that might be like an ego fear based in it. Then I can work through it. I can coach myself through it. So a couple of the things that have worked really well for me to overcome that particular issue is holding on to particular thoughts, particular pieces in my mind. One of them is there are many, many extremely successful people out there who do not have big egos. Just because there are some people who do have big egos when they become successful, there are plenty of people who do not. Therefore, I can view them and see, okay, being successful is not equated with having a big ego. So that's one of the things that has been very helpful for sort of getting past that. Another piece that has been really helpful has been, there's no evidence of me in the past having this gigantic ego. So why would I assume that it would happen in the future? So being able to hold on to these thoughts has been very helpful for working through that. So that's kind of like a fast-tracked version of how I kind of work through that particular issue via like self-coaching. And then, so that's the first example. So the second example here of how I've used self-coaching in my own life and business is something that came up just last month when I was doing the first part of my business planning retreat. It's an ongoing journey right now. But one of the things that really came up for me was that I was taking breaks in the middle of the day from my business planning retreat, and they were not helping me the way that I wanted them to be helping me. So I kind of dove into it and I was like, all right, what's going on here, right? What was happening was that I was taking these breaks because I was doing a lot of deep self-coaching work. So this is going to get a little bit meta. So I was doing a lot of self-coaching work and I needed to take a break from it because it was starting to feel like, ooh, this is like a lot of deep stuff that I'm uncovering, right? So I took breaks from it by watching TV in the middle of the day. I think it was, I don't know, probably Selling Sunset or Love is Blind or Once Upon a Time, one of those shows. And it was helpful from a midday break standpoint, but it was really depleting my energy. So I didn't want to go back to work afterwards. And then by doing some more self-coaching around it, I was able to kind of realize that what I was doing is I was taking those types of breaks. I was taking a break of watching TV because I was seeking safety, because I was really putting myself out there and being very, very vulnerable with myself by doing all of this business retreat stuff and self-coaching. And I really wanted safety. I wanted a safe space from my break. However, the type of safety that I was using, that I was falling back on, was a very constrained type of safety that TV shows. And what I really needed was a much more expansive, spacious safety. And so for me, that would be things like going out for that really long walk, letting myself be out in nature, enjoying walking, that kind of thing, maybe eating nourishing foods while reading a great book, those types of things. Those are more spacious, more expansive types of safety for me. Whereas taking a break by watching a TV show in the middle of the day is a little bit more contracted. So it's not really allowing me to have the opportunity to grow and to do proper self-coaching, right? To do the proper work that I wanted to be doing because it was too constrained. It was really interesting to be able to identify those different types of safety that we tend to seek. And I'm guessing that you watching this have probably also stumbled into that as well, where you've needed some kind of safety because things can be really scary when you are starting your own business, when you're growing your business, and you might have sought safety in a way that felt good in the moment, but it was still constraining you. And so it's really important to find those safety options in a more expansive way that supports you. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So this was something that I was able to work through while I was doing my business plan retreat, because I realized that this was a stumbling block for me. So I literally self-coached myself through it by like asking myself these guided questions and writing down the answers. And that's how I came to this. Again, it's a little bit, that one's a little bit of a meta example. Now, our third example here that I wanted to share with you is related to anxiety. In this instance, I've been able to use self-coaching to manage and mitigate my anxiety. I want to make a note here that anxiety is completely different for everyone. This will not necessarily work for every person, right? This is all simply to give you examples of things. And yeah, so just a little disclaimer there. But what I have found is that my version of anxiety often comes up where I'll be worried about one thing, and if I fix that issue that I'm fixated on and worried about, if I resolve that issue, my mind will jump to something else and it will fixate on that. And that is how I know that I have anxiety. That's one of the key ways that I know. There's other ways too, but that's one of the key ones. So this is something that I actually figured out when I was living in a very small town for the first year of the pandemic. And I can still remember, it was the middle of the night, and I was basically self-coaching in my head because I was worried about I was worried that the door was unlocked, right? It was like the middle of the night and I was wondering like, oh, did I lock the door? What if I didn't lock the door? Again, we lived in this tiny little town, and the type of apartment that we had was on the ground level. Someone else's back door was like right next to our bedroom window, and like all of these types of things. So I was like, there was some discomfort around it. And so I remember I was like, I got up, checked that the door was locked. It was locked, all was well. And instantly I started worrying about something else. And so I was lying there in bed and I was starting to try to figure out what's going on here. So I self-coached myself through it. And I realized that when my brain is popping to something else, that means it's anxiety. It's not a real issue. Now, anxiety itself, very real, right? It's a very real issue. However, the door, whether it was locked or not, that was not a real issue. That was not what I was actually concerned about. I wasn't actually worried about whether the door was locked. It was simply my anxiety fixating on something. By knowing that about myself, I can, I find that it's a lot easier when I know, oh, it's anxiety. This thing that I'm worried about, did I leave the stove on after leaving the house? Right? Like whatever it happens to be, whatever random thing it might be, that's not actually the issue. And that really relieves a lot of the anxiety when I know that that thing is not actually the issue. So I've been able to use self-coaching to work through that, which is really, really cool. I'll often also combine it or layer it on with somatic techniques with like EFT tapping or something like that. That also helps a lot. But I wanted to give this example because I think it really illustrates just how powerful self-coaching can be. And again, anxiety is always completely different for every person. How we work through it is always going to be completely different for every person. I have one more example that I want to share with you, and then I'm going to share with you some sample questions that I might ask myself when I'm going through this in self-coaching. Let me know in the chat if this is all coming together for you, if this is helpful, if you have any questions. Okay. So the fourth example that I wanted to share with you is impatience with website issues, right? With tech issues. And I know that this is something that many of us have frustrations with. Wonderful. I'm so glad everything's making sense so far. Thanks, Tony. Great. Website issues is, I feel like tech frustrations, this type of thing can definitely be a struggle for a lot of people. And for myself, in the past, this has been something that would frustrate me to no end. It was like the bane of my existence. I would get so irritated by it, so impatient. It was just like the worst thing ever. What ended up happening is, this was quite a few years back, but what ended up happening is I was able to really talk myself through it and self-coach. And the way that I coached myself through this particular issue was really bringing it back to, what can I actually control? If my website is down, and it was just down a few days ago, if my website is down, what can I actually control in that case? I do not have the ability to magically bring it back up. It's down. I can't control that. What I can control is connecting with tech support at my website hosting platform, telling them about the issue. What I can control is doing regular routine backups of all the different aspects of my business. So I don't have to worry about, oh no, is it going to be completely gone forever? What I can control is planning ahead and almost like envisioning how I can handle it in different outcomes. So in that case, really looking at, okay, if my website is down and if I cannot control this, here are the things that I can actually do. And here are the ways around that I can work around it. So when my website went down a few days ago, I think I posted on Instagram about it, and I was just like, let me know if you're looking for checkout links, you can just message me directly and I'll send you a checkout link to Productivity Powerhouse or Solopreneur CEO, right? And if not, the website will just be down for a day. It's not the end of the world. It's fine. It'll be back up. But by looking at that, by creating basically a strategy around it after doing that self-coaching, that has been really, really helpful. So it's basically around identifying that I was getting ridiculously impatient and ridiculously frustrated with it, and knowing that this is the reality of doing business, is that there will be tech stuff. And I couldn't keep on basically living like that. I couldn't keep on having that as my routine reaction every time that something went wrong. So it was a matter of self-coaching through it, and then creating these strategies so that when my website went down a few days ago, it was fine. I did not react. I was just like, I did not have that sort of like negative reaction, that visceral reaction. It was just very much, okay, I know that I can contact tech support. It's fine. So it's been really good to work through that with self-coaching. So what you can see here, with these 4 different examples, you can really see how the way that I coached myself was a bit different in each of these scenarios. Some of it was all a mental process, thought exercises. Some of it was journaling things down. Some of it was bringing in those somatic techniques, right, as well, layering it in with that. Some of it's the strategy side that, layering that in. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach it depending on the situation. A few of the questions, I think I have like 12 questions here or something like that I might ask myself, that I typically would ask myself, some sample questions here. First of all, really looking at what's going on. If something feels sticky, how am I handling it? And how do I know that something's a problem? How do I know when something is sticky for me in my life or my business? Looking at what started this and where are there links between this particular thing and anything else that might be happening in my life and business. Another piece that I'll then add in is asking, is this true? For example, if I'm thinking, I cannot do that, or before I do this thing, I need to do X, Y, Z. I like to check in and see, okay, is that actually true? Do I actually need to do X, Y, Z before I do this other thing? Is it actually true that I cannot do this, that there is absolutely no way to do this thing that I want to do? By checking in and asking if that's true, it helps to really look at, okay, the vast majority of the time, there's actually something else going on. This connects back to reframing how you're approaching things, which we talk about in step 7 of Productivity Powerhouse. You can check back with that lesson on reframing. I would definitely recommend that you do that. Another question that I'm always going to ask myself is, what am I willing to do about this, and what am I not willing to do about this? It is okay if you identify specific things in your life or your business that is like an issue or a frustration or whatever it might happen to be, and you are not willing to do a particular thing to deal with it. It's really important to be honest with yourself about that, because if you are not willing to do this thing over here, then there's probably multiple things over here that you are willing to do and that can fix the problem. And asking this question is also going to be really useful, because it's going to open the doors that much more for you to be able to see, oh, it's not that this is the only way to do a particular thing. There's actually other options. And if I'm not willing to do it this way, then let's explore what I am willing to do. What are all the other things? I'll also like to ask myself, what do I want to be doing? What do I envision for, my ideal routine, my ideal lifestyle? Why do I desire that particular thing? This is very specific, getting lots of clarity, especially around what problem is coming up. How am I holding myself back? What is particularly going on here in this particular moment with this particular issue? So this connects back to the self-leadership spotlight training in Productivity Powerhouse, in the section where we talk about that question of, for what purpose? And then, now that I know what I want, after doing all those types of things, how does all of this fit together? What are the parts of me that are seemingly conflicted, and what's actually going on there? So kind of starting to unpack that piece of it. And then really looking at, where am I holding myself back? Where am I the bottleneck? Where am I the one that's really getting in my own way? And then what can I do differently? So those are some of the different questions that I might ask myself while I'm doing my own self-coaching sort of session, depending on the type of issue that I'm working through, the type of things that are coming up for me. I might follow different pieces there. Now, I want to make 3 really important points. If you are doing self-coaching, these are really, really essential to keep in mind. Number 1, self-honesty and self-trust are essential to doing this work. That is why you need to develop those skills at the same time in order to effectively self-coach. You will not get the right answers, right? You're not going to actually get the answers that are really going to help you and support you unless you are being very honest with yourself and trusting yourself with all of this. So these are practices and skills we can always, all of us, continue developing on an ongoing basis. Again, just like with productivity is something we always can do better at. Self-coaching is something we can always all do better at. I do self-coaching in my business, in my life, every single week, multiple times a week, and I'm still developing it. I'm still building that skill. Self-trust and self-honesty are the exact same. We still can constantly build them. We can constantly fine tune them, which is really cool. It's really, really great. And there are, in step 1 of Productivity Powerhouse, there's a couple of little thought exercises for developing self-trust and self-honesty. So if that's something you want to work on, go back to those lessons. And this is also something that we build on in Solopreneur CEO. I mentioned earlier that my clients are learning how to do self-coaching as we're going through the program, but we're not just throwing them into the deep end, right? It's not like we do one session that's like, okay, now go off and do a bunch of self-coaching on your own. That's not how it works. It's a lot of doing the coaching during our sessions, building the self-trust and the self-honesty along the way, and developing those self-coaching skills so that you can just go off and start doing self-coaching, right? And then building in those thought exercises. So it's like guided self-coaching. All of this builds on one another. And it's really, really important because you need to have all of these pieces in play in order for your self-coaching to be really effective. Okay, so that's the first thing that's really, really important to keep in mind and to work on is your self-honesty and your self-trust. The second important thing to keep in mind while you are doing self-coaching is that you are asking the right questions for this particular session of self-coaching, and that you are following the root issue paths. And the reason why this is so important is because you don't want to get mistakenly stuck and follow a line of questions that don't actually contribute to your breakthroughs. You don't want to get veered off onto a totally different track. You want to make sure that when you are doing self-coaching, when you are following particular issues that might be arising, that you're able to really focus in and follow the things that are actually issues. And again, this is going to look totally different for every person. And this is also why there's not going to ever be any standardized questions of these are the questions you should always ask yourself every time you're doing self-coaching. There are sample questions, there are broad ones, but it's always going to look a little bit different because everything that we might coach ourselves through is going to look a little bit different. And asking the right questions and holding space for yourself to sit with those answers, to be willing to listen to yourself, to hear yourself, to acknowledge yourself. This is also about kindness. This is about being kind to yourself. So that can be really hard for a lot of people. This used to be really hard for me. It's so much easier for us to be mean to ourselves. It's so much easier for us to put ourselves down, for us to beat ourselves up than it is to be kind. But the more that we are kind to ourselves, the more that it creates that space to develop the self-trust, to develop the self-honesty, to be able to coach ourselves effectively. So that's the second key piece that I want you to sort of keep in mind, that being kind to yourself is going to make this whole thing a lot easier. And again, kindness is another one of those skills. It's another practice that we can do on an ongoing basis for ourselves. The third key piece to keep in mind while you are doing self-coaching in your own life and business is that this is empowering. This is about experiencing real change as a result of the breakthrough. It's not like just about having an epiphany. It's also about experiencing a new reality as a result. And that is so cool because you're self-coaching, you're coaching yourself, you're going through these really great mindset shifts, you're having these breakthroughs, these wonderful realizations about yourself. And as a result of that, you're then able to take action. And especially when you look at it as that thing where, you think that you have all these issues. When you ask the right questions, it comes down to this issue over here. It's not these 10 other issues. It's actually this issue down here. You deal with that. And suddenly those other 10 issues aren't really problems anymore. They're not getting in your way the way that they used to. So you're kind of leapfrogging over those issues, and you're able to get those real results from doing that. So it's really, really cool because it's getting you these amazing mindset shifts while also being able to take action and being able to tangibly see the progress that you're making. And I love it. It's fantastic. It's amazing. Okay, so that is everything that I wanted to share about how I do self-coaching in my own life and business. Let me know, what do you think about this? Do you have any questions? Let me know in the chat, or if you're watching the replay of this, then shoot me an email and let me know. Was this helpful for you? Okay, do you ever reach a point while self-coaching where you get stuck and can't figure out what's going on or how to get through it? Yeah, okay. I'm so glad that you asked this. Yes, that can definitely happen. It happens a lot less the more that you're doing self-coaching. And it's one of those things that when it comes up, it might indicate that it could indicate a few different things, but one of the things it might indicate is that you're going down a path that is not necessarily the root issue path. You're sort of going off course a little bit. It could also mean that the types of questions or the approach that you're taking isn't necessarily the best fit in that particular scenario. those might be a couple of the big things that might be going on. It might also be that you're a little bit too in it, and you need to kind of like take a step away from it if you're struggling. So you need to just like take that break, kind of like, I mean, like the entire concept of anti-hustle, right? So like really embodying that, of being like, all right, I'm not going to force myself through it. If it's not working, if it's not coming together, then I'm going to step away from this and then revisit it. But if you're trying to do it like internally, you know, in coaching in your mind, and nothing's coming out, then switching to like the journaling of it can sometimes be, I find that can be really helpful. Or talking to yourself out loud, working through it in sort of a different way. That's what I find is very helpful. If I'm stuck on something, I'll just be like, okay, you know, I'll take a step away from like writing things down, or I'll, you know, whatever it might be. And I'll just be like, okay, what's going on here? This is really weird that I'm not getting at what the actual issue is. Let's try to figure this out. Let's just talk it out. Whatever happens to come to mind. Is that a thing? Does that feel like it might be a thing? No. What about this thing over here? Oh, that might be something. And then kind of following it. Yeah. Does that help? Wonderful. Good. I'm glad. Yeah. Yeah. Self-coaching is amazing. I love it. It's so good. Okay. Are there any other questions or anything else that you would like me to mention, to talk about on this topic of self-coaching? If there is, then I can totally speak to it. If not, again, if you're watching the replay and you have a question or anything like that, just shoot me an email, and I can answer it that way. If you want help with this, with all of this coaching, all of the self-coaching and working through all this to get you to a point where you can self-coach really effectively, then you can grab your spot in Solopreneur CEO. If there's no other questions, then I think that we'll just wrap up our topic for today. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a lot of fun. You're welcome. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.